Spring games are past, and we are reaching peak offseason content where stuff is drying up. The Athletic released a list of top 25 college football players of this century. And since I don't have a membership to The Athletic, I just went with ESPN's list from last year. Now, obviously, being a Buckeye in a Big Ten, in the Big Ten blueprint, there's a lot of, players that come to mind over the last 25 years. But this is a complete college football list. And to me, this list represents, can you tell the story of college football without this player? Is it possible to tell the story of college football over the last 25 years without this player being included? The game has had its fair share of talented players, whether it be skill positions or the big uglies in the trenches. And this video is going to focus on basically on those players that made college football over this last quarter century. So before I get started with a couple names on the list, I'm not going to hit them all, but what college players come to mind that, man, he defined this era? Wow, this guy was unstoppable. This man was a force defensively, could not get past him. Type some names down below in the comment section. I'd love to hear who you think is a no-doubter on this list. Now, I'm not going to list them all, but number 25 out of the Big Ten, running back from Wisconsin, Jonathan Taylor, the two-time Doak Walker Award winner. He was just hardly impossible to tackle. He was just phenomenal tailback, had great vision, great shiftiness, combined with great power. And so he came in at 25 on ESPN's list. I'm a defensive guy first and foremost, so guys like Ed Reed of the 01 Miami defense on the national championship winning team, guys like Ray Malaluga should be on this list. They're not. The USC talented linebacker out of the Trojans. From the Big Ten flavor, James Laurinaitis, Paul Postlesny, some other Iowa great linebackers that have come through. But Ed Reed did make this list. He was a dominant force, not only at the collegiate level, but in the NFL. But this is strictly a list based on the college production, not based on what they did in the NFL at the next level. That is important, obviously, for recruiting and other purposes. But for this list, for ESPN, and for the subjectivity that they use, it was their college production, their college careers. Another dude that stood out to me on this list was Tyrann Mathieu. That's right, the Honey Badger out of the LSU team that did fall short in the national championship in the rematch, the BS rematch with Alabama. Tyrann Mathieu was it was so fun and so electric to watch. So many picks, so many disruptions in the backfield, forced fumbles, interceptions, hard-hitting tackles, as well as coverage. Just the complete player. Very, very complete. Another dude, this guy from the SEC, cracked the top 25. Actually, the top 15 was David Pollock. Obviously, we know him now as an ESPN broadcaster on game day, but the man was a huge defensive tackle, a massive disruptor for the Georgia Bulldog defenses back in the early 2000s. He played for a team that could never get over the top, but man, was he a dominant force, and he was one of the headline names back in the early 2000s. Switching modes a little bit to the offensive side of the ball, quarterbacks. Let's talk about them. What are some quarterbacks that they just help tell the story of college football? Well, Baker Mayfield made the list. I wouldn't have necessarily put him on this list. Kyler Murray made the list too. That's definitely he was phenomenal. Both those players were phenomenal. Let's just be completely honest. But players that you can't tell the story of college football without, to me, that screams Johnny Manziel. Tim Tebow, of course, made the top 10. And, of course, Vince Young. He made it as well. Lamar Jackson was on this list as well as a Heisman-winning quarterback for the Louisville Cardinals. And he was so unreal. I remember watching him play in his first kind of his breakout game versus Syracuse in the Dome. That was a phenomenal watch. It was a Friday night game, and nobody had heard of him yet. That was the season before his Heisman winning season. Some receivers made the list, and when I think about the last 25 years, guys come to mind like Julio Jones, A.J. Green, of course, Larry Fitzgerald. elevated the Pitt Panthers to a BCS Bowl winning team. Devontae Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner. Obviously guys like Marvin Harrison from Ohio State perspective. Marv didn't make the list, but Devontae did. Julio Jones and AJ Green did not for some reason. I thought they were clear omissions. They were unguardable in the SEC. Even with all those great defenses, they could not be stopped. Reminds me a lot of what Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith are doing now in comparison. Very different wide receivers, of course, those two are, but very comparable into how they just barnstormed into college football and took over the sport. Some of the quarterbacks that got left out, though, really shocked me. I mean, Pat White in that 06-07 West Virginia teams, along with Steve Slayton, but Slayton he's probably not a top 25 guy in terms of college football the last 25 years. But how does Pat White get left off this list? I know, obviously, not everybody can make it. A lot of position groups like offensive linemen got overlooked. Defensive line, for the most part, got overlooked. But, man, Pat White was so electric in that Rich Rod West Virginia offense. I feel like you can't tell the story of college football the last 25 years without mentioning at least one of those electric West Virginia players, whether it was Tavon Austin, Pat White, Steve Slayton, some other dudes that fit the bill as well. Jameis Winston is another quarterback that I feel like you just can't leave off this list. Now, Cam Newton made the list, despite only being a kind of one-hit wonder, obviously. Went to Florida, got kicked out, went to JUCO route, and came back and won the national title. Absolutely dominant, yes. But just for 1 year. For me, that's not enough to make it. Yes, he did win a national title, and he was one of the, if not the main reason the Auburn Tigers won the national title. But you got to put together for 2 or 3 more years at the highest level in college football. Not the JUCO, not riding the bench. Joe Burrow, he did it for a year and a half, 2 years as an LSU starter, and he did make this list. That's another one that's a little more suspect to me, but I can understand because of the records and numbers he put up. A dude that rightfully got put on this list is a one that almost single-handedly took Ohio State down in the horseshoe, and that's defensive end / edge linebacker Khalil Mack. He was going up against an Ohio State offensive line that had many dudes drafted, some that are still playing in the NFL today, and he was making them look silly. They were turnstiles. Khalil Mack, I watched him play that game against Ohio State. I think it was in 2013, might have been 2012, Urban's first or second year, and he was completely unblockable. Just absolute dominant force. I was getting it from all my Michigan friends, and they were saying, bro, you guys look embarrassing out there. I said, we do. But I guarantee you this guy is going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft this coming year. And that's what he was. That position group is one that really got overlooked in this top 25 list. Like I said, from a Big Ten perspective, you got linebackers. There were 3-time consensus All-Americans like Puz Lesney and James Laurinaitis, A.J. Hawk, dudes like that. Now, obviously, I have my Buckeye glasses on, my Big Ten glasses on. But there were some dominant All-Americans, 3-time consensus All-American linebackers that I feel like the linebacker position got really overlooked on this ESPN list. Going back to the wide receiver position just a little bit, there are some guys that made the list. Justin Blackmon was one. He was so ridiculous for Oklahoma State, both in personality and in terms of dominance from the position. But there were others that got left off, like a Michael Crabtree from Texas Tech, that huge upset, in the last second versus Texas in 2008. It was. You can't tell the story of college football without Michael Crabtree, at least not in that year or those couple years that he played and was dominant for the Red Raiders. Some other notable omissions: Devin Hester out of Miami Hurricanes, and maybe even Percy Harvin, and of course Deshaun Jackson, just playmakers that didn't crack the top 25, but perhaps deserve to be in that. Let me know if I'm wrong about that. But please comment down below. I'll leave the link to the article in the description. I'd love to hear, who were your players? Denard Robinson didn't make the top 25. He definitely should have made the top 25. He was a story in college football. Maybe some down years, yes, but he was a stat-producing machine. So comment down below some players you think I missed, players that dominated in these last 25 years, in your opinion, and thought should have been on this top 25 list. Look over that list, go over it, and see what you think for yourself. Who stood out to you? Vince Young obviously had to be on the list. One of the top 5 players on the list. And clashed with Reggie Bush in that amazing epic Rose Bowl on January 1st, 2006 in the 2005 national title game. But that's going to do it for this one. Go Bucks and God bless. We'll see you on the next one.